Machines is Tower 49.
Go ahead, 49. Are you still an effective team?
Well, goddamn good, Victor.
Yeah.
Ahoy, everyone! My name is Bobby Shortle, and I'm here with Nick Rocco Scalia, and we are the Intrepid Filmographers. Every mini-series, we chart a course through the full filmography of an under-discussed genre or journeyman filmmaker. In this expedition, we do our best to try and be explorers, using our years of film knowledge to help guide us, but always being open to discovering new things about the medium we love so much. We are currently embedded in the films of Joseph Kosinski. Today we attempt to decode his second film, Oblivion. And one thing is for sure, we are a very effective team. Nick, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing good. I like the word embedded. I think that is exactly what we are here. We're kind of just getting started, but yeah. I'm thinking Joseph Kosinski all the time now, right? Like I'll see commercials or something like that. And just since we started this series, and I know he did some, and we'll probably talk about that tonight, but yeah, I sort of see him everywhere I go.
Yeah.
I feel like we know each other. I feel like we go way back. Me and you and Joseph Kosinski.
Me, you, and Joe are an old trio, old friends. I don't
know.
Are
we going Joe now? I kind of feel like we're almost in a Joe kind of basis at this point.
I am, but I feel like I've watched a lot of, like, between Tron last time and Oblivion this time, I've watched a lot of special features with Mr. Kosinski, and he doesn't present himself like a Joe. Like,
no, he doesn't. He's very much a Joseph.
Wearing a suit. He has very well coiffed hair. I've noticed one thing. He sounds an awful lot like Matthew Modine. He also kind of looks like Matthew Modine a little bit. Like he's got the same kind of pinched eyes, and he's got a very similar voice. Like I think if you closed your eyes and listened to both of them talk, they would sound very similar.
It's funny. I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about Matthew Modine, and one of the hosts knew who that was. One of them, there's three. One of them knew who he was just in general. Mm-hmm. One knew him from Stranger Things, and one was like, "Who the hell is Matthew Modine?" And they were trying to figure out whether Matthew Modine was ever a thing, like in the 80s, whether he was kind of an A-list guy at one point or whether he barely existed. And so another person that's been kind of on my mind lately also. I like Matthew Modine.
I like Matthew Modine quite well. And I think in the 80s, he definitely, I don't know if he was A-list, but he was close for a period of time, I believe. He was in a lot of big deal movies, and he was the star of some of those movies. So, oddly, the thing I think about Matthew Modine the most of, other than Stranger Things now, is that I think it was HBO film about the AIDS crisis. It was called And the Band Plays On. And he was the star of that
91, 92. Yeah. So post 80. So he did have a career after that.
He did, for sure. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny, After Stranger Things is very popular, and a whole generation of people who don't have any idea who Matthew Modine is now know who he is because of that show, but they think of him as like an old guy. And then I saw some people, on social media being like, "Excuse me, this is what he looked like when he was in his 20s." Yeah, he was a notoriously handsome man. That was like the whole thing about Matthew Modine when he first started. Matthew Modine, Joseph Kosinski doppelganger, obviously not in the film Oblivion, which we're talking about tonight.
Such a small cast in the movie Oblivion. I'm sure there was room for him in some role in Oblivion, because there's we're going to talk about maybe 5 actors tonight, if we even get to all 5 of them. And other than that, it's basically just a kind of an empty world.
He could have played the Nikolai Coster-Waldau role for sure.
Well, anybody could have played that role, yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk about that. But we're here to talk about, what's this, a 2013 film? 2013's Oblivion. So 3 years after Tron Legacy, this film comes out. And this isn't one of those, I think when we get a little bit into his other movies, Mr. Kosinski's movies, we're going to talk about some false starts or some movies that he was attached to that he ended up not doing. But this was pretty much right off of Tron. He starts working on this film. We talked about a little about last week, but he actually wrote this thing or started conceptualizing this thing 5 years before he ever did Tron, right? In 2005, when he moved to Los Angeles, he created this, which is such an interesting thing. And one of these things that I don't know how you feel about it. It rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, where he's like, I made this graphic novel that I sold to this radical comics company, but I never intended it ever to be a graphic novel. It was always going to be like a pitch deck for a movie, is basically what he said.
Yeah, I read that. I mean, I I'm not bothered by that. It's a strange approach. It worked for him, so who am I to criticize? But yeah, because I knew it was a graphic novel, and I was kind of wondering when I started watching it, like, I wonder if there is a version of that I could read. And I guess a couple of pages of it are available online, which I have not looked at because, I mean, why would I, right? Like, I've seen the movie now. I've read the script in some sense. So yeah, I don't know. It's an approach.
Yeah. I just there's something about when people like use a medium to further themselves in a different medium, it always sort of rubs me the wrong way. And I spent a lot of time talking and embedded in like sort of the comics world for probably close to 10 years when I did a comic book podcast. It's just an interesting situation. He basically said like the relationship with Rocco Comics let him, sort of get paid to develop this movie when nobody would pay him to develop a movie. Not that Rocco Comics had any preconceived notions that like it was going to be a book that they were going to sell. They get to license the book out, get paid rights for it, obviously, for when the book gets optioned. I've seen that like on the special features of the Blu-ray, they show pages and they show like, it's basically like an art book. Basically, it's a concept art book that has like pages of text, like either in between it or overlaid on top of this concept art. And it really is, I mean, it's stunning concept art. Based off of this, there's a bidding war with like all the major studios. He's basically he's doing post on Tron, and there's a bidding war happening for the right to make this movie. Disney ends up winning it. They greenlight the movie. They start to produce it. And then pretty quickly, they're like, there's no way we can make this PG-13 movie into a PG movie and have it retain any of the reasons why we bought it. So we're going to let somebody else buy it, basically. We're going to put it into turnaround, which is like a studio term for basically...
We're not making it.
But we still own the rights to it, but we're not making it. And it could happen again. We're backburnering it. But this way they let other studios bid on it. Universal ends up buying those rights. And, of course, making the PG-13 movie. It seems insane that Disney was like, we can't make a PG-13 movie. It's like the standard rating for movies.
Well, I was just going to say that. And like, yes, there's some violence in this movie, but it's it's mostly off screen. It's not graphic at all. You would think those drones could really do some damage to a human body, but like people just get kind of disintegrated or blown off the screen. And I don't know, to me, that was more a thing about the MPA or the MPAA, whatever it is. It's the MPA now. It was the MPAA. Like, how much the standards have changed over the years, because this is a G. Like, this is inspired very heavily by late 60s, early 70s sci-fi, which I love. I think it's a wonderful period of Hollywood filmmaking. And like, you could get away with so much. Like Planet of the Apes, we were talking about that a couple weeks ago off air. And that's a G-rated movie where some pretty gnarly stuff happens to characters in that. And you could take your 3-year-old kids to see that movie. And for this very, very sort of chaste, non-violent movie, and I guess there's a little bit of nudity in it, but easily could have been cut out. It's from the back anyway. The thought that can't be a PG anymore, like, are we overly sensitive as a culture, or were we in 2013? Because it's only gotten worse. Whatever it is, it's only gotten worse now.
I just think, like, when you have adult people engaged in, like, tense situations and there's like romantic stuff happening and all this other stuff, it just feels to me like MPA is just going to default to PG-13. But also I feel like studios want it to be PG-13 because PG movies don't sell. There are no movies that are PG anymore, basically, except for like Pixar movies. So if it's not animated, you're not getting a PG rating. And they don't really release a lot of live action movies under the Disney banner. I'm just surprised they wouldn't be like, okay, this is going to be, I guess Touchstone doesn't exist anymore. I guess that's probably what, they didn't have like their like, this is where we put our grown-up movies, so we don't put the Disney logo in the
Disney
in the
After
front
Dark.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything's something after dark for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I remember when I was a kid, like, oh, it's a Touchstone movie, so it's Disney, so it's still going to be a little restrained, but you might see something cool in there that you wouldn't get in your standard Disney release.
Yeah, your Jerry Bruckheimer Disney collaborations, like pre Pirates of the Caribbean. Were Touchstone
National
pictures.
Treasure's PG, I think.
Yeah, National Treasure's PG. Yeah, all those movies are PG. Which is crazy. It's insane. It's insane that, I guess, is Pirates of the Caribbean PG? I don't even know.
That was PG-13. And like, I wasn't sure, we talked about it last week, but Tron Legacy, like, I've seen both. I've seen it listed as a PG-13 movie. I've also seen it as a PG. And I mean, nothing really happens to any humans in that movie that I would consider objectionable. They're all computer people.
Yeah. So the film gets into Universal, and there's a script written by Kosinski and his partner William Monahan. There was a rewrite by someone named Carl oh my god, it's very like Gajusek, yeah. And then when the film passed into Universal's hands, a final rewrite's done by Toy Story 3 writer Michael Arndt, but under a pen name, Michael D. Brun.
And Little Miss Sunshine writer
Little Miss Sunshine, and also original first draft of The Force Awakens, Michael Arndt. So very big screenwriter, especially at the time, like an incredibly in-demand screenwriter, does sort of like this like ghost write on the script. I mean, we're going to talk about it. I don't know what the rewrites brought to the script that wasn't there before, because there isn't much in the scripting of this in the first place.
We're putting our cards on the table already.
Yeah.
I mean, if we didn't think that, then we should maybe reevaluate ourselves.
Yeah, we shouldn't be doing a podcast where we act like we're movie experts. If that was the case.
Act like movie experts.
Yeah.
There is no such thing. There's just people who act like it.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. But one of the biggest things, and one of the reasons why I think this movie gets so much attention so quickly, is that basically Tom Cruise comes to see Kosinski during the post work on Tron, and he loves the pitch for Oblivion, loves the pitch for it, and basically is like, I'm doing this with you, I'm in. And when you have someone like Tom Cruise attached, and you hear all these filmmakers, right, especially people who started developing movies that he wasn't originally attached to, when he becomes attached to something, it immediately becomes a big movie. It doesn't matter what the movie is. It can be your little drama. If Tom Cruise is part of it, it's going to be a big movie, and there's a lot that comes along with that. And I think as we go through the plot of this movie, there are a couple of things I'm going to point out, which I think are for the benefit of Tom Cruise being there, and then I think there are some things which are not to the benefit of Tom Cruise being there. But remember, at this point in Tom Cruise's career, we're not, when he comes to see Joseph Kosinski, he's not out of the dark period yet. Ghost Protocol has not come out yet when he goes to see Kosinski during post of Tron Legacy, right?
Yeah, okay. Like Mission Impossible is a going concern at that point, though, and
right. But the last Mission Impossible movie that came out was the third one, which I think is the best one.
Incredible, yeah, I agree.
But is not successful in the realm of those movies, right? Like, Tom Cruise is a fascinating movie star. Obviously, one of the whatever you think of him, one of the greatest movie stars ever to live. One of the maybe the last
one
movie
of the
stars
only ones living. Sure, yeah.
Really left, and he has this obviously unbelievable run of movies from the time he really starts until he jumps on that couch, and for Oprah in 2005. And I think younger people are probably like, I don't even know what that means. Basically Tom Cruise was, Mr. America, sex symbol, movie star from 1980 till 2005, basically. And he had the perfect PR. He saved people's lives. There was no grease in his gears. And then the Scientology stuff starts to come to the head in 2005, and the whole world is like, put on the brakes. I don't know if we want this anymore. The Katie Holmes stuff is happening around this time. He just gets really overexposed. The landscape of how people cover movies and the amount of attention that is coming from a bunch of different sectors is amping up in a way that has never happened before. People's personal life and their details are much easier to access than they ever have been before. And he just becomes, the poster child for kind of crazy at a certain point. And he really sort of pulls back after that. War of the Worlds, which is a huge hit, right? But it starts really huge and then dives pretty quickly. And then he's got Mission Impossible 3 the next year. It highly underperforms. He then does Lions for Lambs in 2007, this movie that doesn't exist.
I'm so happy that you mentioned that, because I was thinking about what he was doing in this period, and I've never seen that, but it sounds very interesting. It's like a Iraq war, but not like a war movie. It's like a home front kind of courtroom type film that
Yeah, it's
he's
also
in,
kind of like a
and
political thing.
Robert
He
Redford had something to do with it. Maybe
Did Redford direct it? I think Redford directed it. I think Redford directed it.
And I remember it coming out. I can visualize the poster, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting role for Tom Cruise. And I never heard anything else of it. You're right. It kind of disappeared in the ether. I like serious Tom Cruise.
Me too.
Before we go any farther, let me just say one of my easily top 3 favorite movies, I don't know where I'd slot it in, is Magnolia. And
okay, yeah, of course.
It's an incredible role for him. He won an Oscar for it. And
well, he was nominated for an Oscar for it.
He was nominated, sorry. So for Best Supporting, I think he should have won.
That was the Michael Caine year, I think. That was the Michael Caine year when Michael Caine won. I believe.
See, my selective memory or my my alternate history, he won for that movie.
He's great. He's amazing in that movie. But we're in this period, right, where he does Lions for Lambs, and people are now like, okay, like that movie made no impact. He then has that small but extremely memorable role in Tropic Thunder, where he plays like the executive, and he's funny in it. And people were like, oh, like look at Tom Cruise being funny. That same year, he does Valkyrie, which is another disappointment. Again, a movie that we'll probably never talk about on this podcast because it's done by a literal criminal of a filmmaker. Like, it's a Bryan Singer film. Like, he's a terrible human being. We're never going to do...
I'm sorry. I remember that being a Robert Zemeckis movie, and I was like, what did he do? I love that guy.
No, it's a Bryan Singer movie.
Bryan Singer. Yeah,
it's a Bryan Singer movie.
Covering him.
Then he does Night and Day.
Oh, I hated that movie.
So this is... in 2010, when he goes to Joseph Kosinski, he's in this run, right, of these movies that we're talking about. And we're running to the end of this run of like, and I'm like, you know, the horn dog, like, you know, Lothario in the movies I'm in, right? Like, people are starting to realize, like, his public persona has shown up too much. He's too much. They know he's too much of a weirdo, so they can't accept him as like a romantic lead anymore. And really,
he hasn't aged physically, though.
No,
like he still looks exactly the same. He could play those roles. The problem is, what you're saying. All the off-screen stuff is starting to catch up with him at this point.
Yes. So then he
can still play those roles now.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we're a little bit. Oh, he started to show his age a
Mission
little
Impossible.
bit. In Mission Impossible.
Well, he looks better than I do, and I'm definitely younger than him.
He looks great. Don't get me wrong, but. Again, with Mission Impossible and in these last couple of years, he's mostly gone away from being like like Ethan Hunt is not a romantic lead really in any of those in the later Mission Impossible movies. He's just like he's much more like himself, which I think is like a robot who's really good at his job. You know what I mean? Like he's just like I intense. You know, I get it done. I'm amazing at what I do. Like that is kind of what his on-screen persona, I think, matching his like. But then, and then in between when he signs on to this movie and when it comes out, he has Ghost Protocol, which people don't remember. Jeremy Renner is in Ghost Protocol because the studio was like, we want Tom Cruise out of this franchise. So we want somebody who's going to take his place. And at the time, Jeremy Renner was like the guy. They're like, can't get Matt Damon? Let's get Jeremy Renner. Like, like he was the guy that was going to replace people. Which seems so crazy now considering like what is his guy has a great career, but he is not a leading action star guy career, but
I don't see why not. But yeah, it never really panned out the way it should have after the Hurt Locker.
And then I feel like Oblivion goes into this other group, which he has that little part in Rock of Ages, and then he does Jack Reacher, Oblivion, and then after Oblivion, he starts to get back. He does Edge of Tomorrow, Rogue Nation, the Jack Reacher sequel. He has a little bump with The Mummy.
That wasn't his fault. Well, it actually might have been his fault, but you can't put it all on Tom Cruise.
God, that movie.
Have you seen it?
Oh yeah, I saw it.
I've always been interested.
I watched it this year. I'd never seen it.
You and no one else.
Yeah, it is it's one of those movies that's just a big nothing burger, basically, is really what it is. It's one of those movies where you can feel how much they wanted to start this universe, and so much of the movie is like, oh, but we've got this little thing here, and we've got this little thing here, and we got this little thing here, and we got this little thing here. And it's like, and there's this really hilarious scene where, and again, in that movie, it's one of the, maybe is really the last movie where Tom Cruise is like, he's in like romantic moments with a co-star who's like 25 years younger than him, but he's playing it like, hello, I am Tom Cruise. I am this character who is 35 years old, even though he's 55 years old or whatever by the time he's doing that movie. And it's really the last time. I forgot who is the female lead of that movie. Annabelle Wallis is she's from Peaky Blinders. is the female lead of that movie. It's a very bad movie. But then he goes into his like, okay, I know what I am now. I've got Mission Impossible. I've got Top Gun. I've got Mission Impossible. And then he's, on top of the world again in many, many ways. And people are celebrating him. But this is right in that period of time where he's trying to figure out how to bring himself back from, where he was. And in many ways, I think he's finding his guys in this moment because he spent a lot of his pre that meltdown time. He went like, okay, look, I'm the biggest movie star in the world. I can get anything made I want. I'm going to do that. Use that to work with interesting directors who I think, can challenge me to have good performances. So he works with Cameron Crowe. He works with Paul Thomas Anderson. Like, that's what he's doing. And after that, like, meltdown, he goes into this shell and he's like, okay, I'm going to find directors who are visually strong, but who I can really be the author of the movies in which I am in.
Author and also the producer, right? Like his company is kind of taking a huge role in these things. And I don't know Tom Cruise, obviously. I don't know what his actual creative input on these things is, but there is this kind of like homogeneousness about things. Like he takes on projects that kind of do a certain thing. It's like you're saying, they play out in a certain way. They treat him they use him in a certain way. And that's all he's going to, like, I don't think we'll ever see. And I think this is what you're trying to say here. We may never see another Tom Cruise in Magnolia kind of role. I think we'll see a lot more Oblivion, Mission Impossible, Top Gun, Maverick type stuff. And maybe one more, right? When he's old, when he actually starts to look old, he'll do one elder statesman kind of role. It'll be a supporting part, and I'm sure he'll get like really good notices for it. But yeah, there's this, I don't know. I don't want to call it like an assembly line sort of thing, but it almost sort of feels like that was the vibe I got from the Mummy trailer, which I don't know too much about it, but there's a scene I remember very vividly where he's like dangling out of a cargo plane and like the cargo's flying out the back of it. And it's like, okay, so this is a Mission Impossible scene in what is ostensibly a remake of a Universal horror movie. And it's like, that must be Tom Cruise. That must have been him or Skydance or whoever said, we got to have one of these here. We're just going to do that. So I don't know. He's an interesting guy though. For people like me who are 5'5" and 3/4, 5'6" on a good day, he's an inspiration to all of us. I mean, you have to be devastatingly handsome and lots of other things too. But I I gotta respect him for that, for being the short guy before Kevin Hart came around.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. He's a fascinating performer. I think, he's one of those people, and we'll probably talk about this as we go along in these movies. I think people often, and I'm guilty of this when I was younger as well, I think often discount the things that make people movie stars and the things that they can do that quote unquote maybe great actors, like people who are much more what we consider like great actors, can't do. They'd be able to react to nothing, to act across from nothing, to be able to play a lot of scenes and a lot of big moments without any words. Like, those things are very difficult. Like, you have to be the center of an entire enterprise just on your own. And obviously he's one of the greatest to ever do that, and also can be a great actor in the right, situations.
Yeah,
as well.
The screen presence is like off the charts. I mean, he's just a mesmerizing actor. Like, even if you don't like him, even if you are kind of caught up in the gossip or whatever, the off-screen stuff that happens, I mean, if he's in a movie, you can't take your eyes off of him. He just has this like, I mean, it's not an everyman quality exactly. It's kind of an ubermensch sort of thing, but he's the movie star, right? And I would like, the one movie I've ever seen him in where he has very little screen presence is Oblivion. So I think that's kind of interesting because everything else, good or bad, he's made some questionable movies. He's made some really, really great movies, but he's always been kind of the central figure in those movies, and he always just kind of commands your attention. And in this one, which you've been saying is kind of in some sense a comeback movie for him, he's nothing. He's barely there. And I don't know. I think some of the drones give better performances than him in this movie.
It's funny because he's barely there, and he's all there is for most of the movie too, which is the thing about the movie in general. Watching a lot of the special features on the Oblivion Blu-ray that I have, and reading up on it, I can definitely see why Cruise and Kosinski bonded with each other, though, because we talked about this with Tron last time. Kosinski was like, I want everything that can be real to be real. That ethos comes over to this movie as well. That entire like apartment that they have, the sky apartment they have.
Oh man, I love that place so much.
They built the whole thing. They surrounded it with screens that projected that sky around them. There wasn't green screen, so they were able. So this is like,
which is the thing that's done so much now, but it's really ahead of its time. And that, like, you know, The Mandalorian, I think, was the first time that was like widely used for something, which was 4 or 5 years ago at this point. But like, we're talking 10 plus years ago where they're already implementing this technology, and it looks great. Like, one of the things I will say about this movie right up front, I mean, not that it's that old, right? But this did not feel dated at all in terms of the way it looked. I mean, there's some things plot-wise, story-wise, that I think in the era we're in technologically now are starting to show their age a little bit, but not the visuals. I really was impressed by that.
I completely agree with you. I think the movie looks great. They wouldn't film the top of a volcano for the skyscapes. So they're actually real skyscapes that they filmed. The bubble ship is completely real. They completely built the bubble ship. The bike is real. You know, the important thing about having the bubble ship be real and the other thing real is that light and stuff plays off of them realistically, you know, and anytime you can give an actor something to respond to that's real, it has the chance to elevate the performance. Obviously, we're going to talk about how maybe it doesn't in this case, but they even designed the cockpit around like Cruise. Like, he told them where he wanted like the controls and stuff like that. And even that screen that Andrea Riseborough's character uses, like, she was actually seeing the stuff that was on that screen, which is crazy.
Very ahead of its time. It's it's a curved tablet kind of thing.
Yeah, the tactileness you can definitely feel in this, and I think that goes to the way that it looks so good, right? The movie does look great. The effects look great. And I'm saying all this nice stuff up front because there's not going to be a lot of nice stuff that I say once we're digging into the actual movie. But like I said, Cruise was cast. They had a bunch of people that they were going to cast for the Julia role. Jessica Chastain was actually cast in this. And then Catherine Bigelow was like, I really want you to do Zero Dark 30. And Cruise let her out of the contract for the movie to go do that movie.
Isn't Jessica Chastain famously tall?
Very tall. Yeah.
That might have had something to do with it.
I don't know. I mean, they've been doing that for years. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is in
Cameron Diaz too,
is in like 30 Marvel movies where he's the shortest person by like a foot. And when he stands next to Chris Evans, he's always on the level with him.
Yeah.
You know?
Amazing what you can do in the apple box.
Yeah, exactly. So they went to Olga Kurylenko for the Julia role, and then Andrea Riseborough was just one of a few people they auditioned for that role. And then other than those three, you have Morgan Freeman, you have Nicholas Coster-Waldau, and you've got Melissa Leo, who's more of a voice performance, obviously, and then Zoe Bell, who apparently I think was supposed to be in more of this movie, because when she shows up at the end, I was like, Zoe Bell was in this movie?
I was like, is that Zoe Bell? She's literally in one shot. It maybe lasts 5-6 seconds. I mean, even Morgan Freeman, he's in it more than that, obviously, but it's kind of a glorified cameo. It's an important role, but screen time wise, a couple of minutes.
Zoe Bell, people don't know, famous, amazing stunt woman. She was most famously Uma Thurman's stunt woman on the Kill Bill movies, and then she's in Death Proof.
Starred in Death Proof, which is awesome.
And she's fantastic in that, and she's had a nice like career, you know, as like a featured actress since that time as well, which is really, really cool.
Well, it's nice to see her for the very few seconds. It's the very end of the movie too, right? Isn't it like the second to last scene?
Yeah, it's like the last shot of the movie, basically. And we'll talk about that scene because I have a lot to say about all that stuff. And then much like in Tron Legacy, he has a electronica group doing the score for this. M83, I guess, is their name. He wrote the script listening to their music. So they do a lot of the music here. But they
had a huge song at the time, which I meant to look it up before we recorded here. Like, I don't remember the name of the song. I can hear it. Like, I can hum it if I need. I won't, but I could. And like, that's all I ever knew them for. But that was all over everything. It was like right around maybe 2010, 2011, and they were like really, really French group. So like, probably they were always bigger in Europe than they were going to be here. But I remember this song was just like totally ubiquitous, and getting them was probably a huge thing at the time. And now it's like, who's M83? Like, I haven't heard anything since, but I do remember really liking that song, and it is kind of sleek and futuristic and very Joseph Kosinski, I feel like. You know, fan of Daft Punk and that type of aesthetic and that sort of feel.
When he talks about this, he goes, oh, you know, Daft Punk did the first one, but they wouldn't really have fit for this, so I got this other group. I'm like, I'm sure that's the reason why he didn't want Daft Punk to do it, because they wouldn't have fit with it. But the guy who did sort of like some of the arranging and some of the background stuff on Tron Legacy is kind of co-credited with the score here. Basically what everyone thought was going to have to happen with Daft Punk happens with M83 here, where they have to have an actual movie composer come in and sort of work it with them. It's shot by Claudio Miranda, who did Tron Legacy, fantastic. He did Life of Pi, did Curious Case of Benjamin Button. He did Top Gun Maverick. He's a fantastic cinematographer. And like we said, the movie looks amazing. Really.
It does. And I love director-cinematographer pairings where they just find out that they sort of work together well and they like each other's aesthetics. John Carpenter and Dean Cundey, or Spielberg and Janusz Kaminski. It's, like just as a film nerd sort of thing also, you can kind of see the visual signifiers like, oh yeah, that's totally a Spielberg Kaminski kind of thing. And then when they ultimately break up or whatever, you can kind of tell the difference. Like that next movie is always kind of a major shift in another direction. But I like to see that. I like to see when directors and cinematographers kind of have that synergistic sort of thing going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And I think, again, this like sort of paints this picture. We were talking about Kosinski last time about this too, where, he's definitely the author of this movie, right? He wrote it.
Well, this one's his baby. Yeah.
It was a concept he was working on for a very long time. If you look at the concept art versus it's very much his vision, and I think this movie is not very good, right? I think visually it looks great. Story-wise, character-wise, performance-wise, I think is kind of a dud, right? And you're already starting to see probably what the strengths of this person, this filmmaker is, and maybe this will change. We have another movie coming up that's completely out of a completely different type of movie next time than we've done these first two, and we'll do it the last two, right? It's a small, intimate character drama. So let's see what he does with actors in that situation. But in this, I feel like at almost every stage of the movie, I was like, I know what you're trying to do here.
Sure.
But you're not achieving it. Whether it be the sort of opening voiceover that's meant to sort of evoke old sci-fi. All it really does for me is like give me a bunch of information that either A, I'm not going to remember, or B, takes all the mystery out of what I'm seeing when we're put into the actual world. I called every twist this movie threw at me probably an hour before it happened. I wasn't even looking for twists.
And that was my biggest problem with the movie story-wise, is that it doesn't have a lot of story, and the second half of it, it's just reveal after reveal after reveal, and like none of them are that surprising, none of them are that interesting, and I kind of want stuff to happen rather than, hey, this thing that you thought was this other thing, well, it's this thing. And I got so tired of that so quickly. And yeah, I saw a few of them coming. There were a couple that kind of sort of took me by surprise, but those were the ones that didn't really make a lot of sense. So I didn't predict them because they just were not very logical. But I mean, I like so many things that this movie is trying to do. Like you kind of said, you could see where the influences are and the inspiration. And I love sci-fi. I particularly love that, silent running kind of era of sci-fi and Planet of the Apes and Alien. And I just like... Can I make a blanket statement about this entire movie?
Absolutely.
Is it too early to do that?
No. Let's do it. Blanket statements are fine.
Okay, because I thought this was kind of fascinating in that we talked a little bit last time about Joseph Kosinski, how he starts his career essentially making commercials that look like movies and feel like movies, right? There are these 60-second or 30-second things where they have this very sort of sleek look. They're very cinematic. They have a little bit of characterization. The Gears of War trailer is a great example of that, right? Sets up a world, gives you an action scene, kind of creates a little bit of emotional connection between you and the character. So like here he is making this movie, and to me, it just feels like a commercial. Like this is a feature-length, big-budget sci-fi movie that feels like a commercial. Like it is that thin in terms of the characterization. It's that like there's a real like impersonal feel that this movie. I think that's the best way I can describe it. Right? Like none of these characters feel like real people, and therefore I don't care that much what happens to them. And I'm sorry, I'm going to bring this up again. Tron Legacy could have gotten away with that, and then it has this beautiful scene later on, the Jeff Bridges doing the fatherly thing, watching the two young characters kind of get to know each other, and I loved that scene so much. And there is literally nothing in this movie that approaches the gravity of that at all. And like some pretty big deal stuff happens here. You know, major characters die in this movie. There is stuff that should be affecting, and literally none of it is. It's like this movie feels like, and I know it wasn't because we're talking about 2013 here, like they're talking about AIs writing screenplays now. Like this feels like it was written by an AI, and I know that it wasn't, but I think this is the kind of thing that they're going to do, and that's why people are going to get tired of those very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with almost everything that you're saying. I mean, you love that Tron scene way more than I do, but...
I love it probably more than anybody else in the universe does, but I don't know, man. It moved me.
But
because I'm a dad or something. You're a dad too.
I'm a dad too. Again, that scene is poetry compared to what we're given here. And
for sure.
And here's the thing. If the movie was just detached in general and it was just like, we're not really concerned with the emotions of these characters, we're just concerned with like the function and sort of minutia and the way this world works and this mission they have to achieve, I would have had a much better time with the movie. The problem is like, you know, you're not really that concerned about the rules of the world. Like you give a very cursory idea like of what it's like the anti-Inception, right? Which is like, we're just gonna have whole scenes where all it is me just telling you about like what the rules of this world, which I love. I don't care about like if that's what you want your movie to be, I'm all in with you, man. Like go for it, you know. But this movie is like, no. We know you really care about Jack Harper and Julia and Vicky or whatever, and I'm like.
Vika. Oh, that drove it. Her name is Victoria. He calls her Vika.
I know.
I've known Victorias.
No human's
not
ever
one
done
of them. You're either Vicky or you're Tori. I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a listener out there. I highly doubt it though.
It feels.
Get in contact with us, Vika.
Yeah. It feels to me like something that would happen like if you have family that comes from like you know the Sweden, Finland like area possibly. You know like that's what it feels like to me. But anyway. Like it or even like these other characters, even it's even more egregious with like the rebellion human characters, whatever, because you spend zero time with them, and and he plays it off like you're supposed to care when the drone comes in and starts mowing them down, and I'm like, you have given me no reason to care about any of these people at all, because you know, and again, we're talking, this movie came out 10 years ago. Obviously, this podcast is about really breaking down these movies, so I'm not really worried about spoiling anything here, but like the fact that Jack is a clone, there's, according to Morgan Freeman's character, thousands of him, right? And the way this movie at the end sort of like sells out the fact that like even his wife doesn't care which version of Jack is around. As long as one of them's around, she's fine with it. You know, it's like, why am I supposed to care about this person who the movie doesn't care about? The movie doesn't really care about Julia either. And I would say too, like, you know, just from a storytelling perspective, the way the female characters are used in this movie is like, they're just props. Like, and it gives you.
Oh yeah, I mean, all of the characters are. So it's it's not just they just get it the worst. I really have. I mean, we're I guess Vika, we're supposed to dislike her. There's a scene later on where we see the real version of her. We're gonna get so lost in the weeds with this ridiculous plot.
There isn't really the thing is like there isn't even that much of a plot. Like there are things that happen, obviously, but. And I want to say this before we get too far because it blew my mind watching this movie. Because this is a big budget movie that made $89 million domestically. It made like $280 million worldwide. It's a movie that people have seen, right? It's a movie that stars Tom Cruise. I just assumed always that it was like kind of boring, which it is kind of boring, and just kind of like whatever. This thing is so colossally stupid in so many ways that I am surprised I haven't heard more about it, because like this movie ends with Melissa Leo voicing an alien inverted pyramid that wants to destroy the world.
Well, it's the Illuminati pyramid from the dollar bill. It's that, just like with a red eye.
Yeah. It's some of them is insane in this movie, and the fact that.
But before we completely call it stupid, right? There are ideas in this movie that I think are interesting. There are things that I think in the hands of and I don't know who, I can't even Christopher Nolan, maybe. I don't know. Like, there are things that if they were executed correctly and were given a little bit of thought, and if we cared a little bit more about these characters, or if we cared about these characters, if we cared at all, this could have been something. Like, there was nothing in this movie where I was like, oh, I hate that so much, and I can't see what a good version of that might be. And so I kind of have to give it credit for that, and Joseph Kosinski credit for that as well. Like, there was no point at this movie, like, I wanted to finish it. Like, I didn't just watch the entire movie because we were going to talk about it on the show. I kind of wanted to see where it was going. I thought maybe it would do something cool in the end that it didn't do. It just gave us kind of an exposition scene, and then that moment that we were just talking about, and then this happy ending that's just laughable.
Yes.
But looks really beautiful.
Yes. It makes me more upset with the movie because that potential is there and it didn't execute on it. Right? Like,
oh yeah, sure. No, I'm with you. I'm upset about it too.
You know, that's really my problem. And not that I'm not saying Joseph Kosinski is a stupid person, and I'm not saying that
no.
Their ideas of the movie that are the baseline of the movie is a dumb idea, but the execution of it is such a misfire in almost every single way. You know, that I feel like it completely sells itself out. And like I said, like, I'm a big performance guy. Like, if there are good performances in something, I can usually, like, ignore a lot of chuff, you know, that's happening. I can ignore.
You must have had a real problem here then.
Yeah, I can ignore plot holes. I can ignore whatever. And I'm trying to track the performances, right? So I'm like, okay, we've got Tom doing his Tom thing, and he's mostly kind of flat, you know? He has a couple of moments which I think work, especially when he's playing, what I think Tom Cruise played better than anybody, which is like this like dumbfounded almost rage. You know, those moments where he's like, I don't know what's going on, and I'm going to freak out about it. Like, he's so good at that. And those moments, like, his performance kind of plays through a little bit there. But most of the time I think he's flat. I think Olga Kurylenko is very bad in this. Like, and again, her character has nothing to do, and her character has no sort of through line that makes any sense. She shows up as sort of like this, like, I know it's real. I've got a mission. I'm going to do this. And then 2 scenes later, she's like crying, like, you know, huddled behind Tom Cruise's character while people are shooting. Like, she doesn't know how to do anything.
Well, this movie's a love triangle too, but I have zero investment in any of it, right? Like, it's kind of an interesting idea, and a better movie could really do something with this, where he's married and he's been with this person for, oh man, since his mandatory memory wipe 5 years ago, which we talk about in the opening 30 seconds of this. Like, I wonder if that's going to come to something later on. Just like this brick that gets dropped on you, like you're just going to forget about it. This has a lot of Shyamalan similarity. There's another movie that I think this reminds me of a lot. I'll get to it later. Not one of his, but one that's on the same level of, oh my God, what were they doing? But there's this idea that he's been married to someone, and we kind of see they have something of a nice relationship, although clearly she's lying to him about who she really is and what their intentions are and those kinds of things. And then Olga Kurylenko's character shows up, and they are, you know, long lost lovers. Like, it's this thing from his past that he doesn't remember. She's his actual wife, but he also has this new wife, and you could really do something with that. And if any of those characters were written as more than just a paper thin thing, if any of those performances were halfway decent, I really think that would have been interesting. And like, this movie is reaching for some pretty big ideas that it just has no idea what to do with.
Yeah. I will say this. I think the most interesting performance in the movie is Andrea Riseborough's
I like her a lot. Yeah, I like her and everything.
She's a very interesting actress, right? She's obviously been nominated for an Oscar now, you know, almost 10 years after this, she's nominated for an Oscar. But, you know, I'm trying to track in her performance, right? Because I think she's the only one who's really giving off the weird conflicting ideas of what the character is in her performance. Because, you know, I think even now, I'm not really 100% sure. She obviously knows more than Jack knows, right? But I don't think she knows they're working for, like, the alien bad guys, right? I don't think she knows that, right? But I think she knows that there's something about their relationship. There used to be this other person, because she says that thing like, oh, it was always her or whatever about their character or whatever, about Julia.
Well, there's levels of, like, need to know, right? Like, the Tet is feeding her information, and it's more information than Tom Cruise, who is, you know, he's the dumbest character in this movie because he has to be. But I think, like, this artificial intelligence knows that and is comfortable with just him knowing nothing. She knows a little bit, and neither one of them can completely put the full picture together.
Yeah, but she's playing like a ton of emotions all the time, because there's that moment near the beginning where he first starts kind of talking about how like this other thing's going on, and we should really look into this, and what if we're doing like this thing, something feels weird, and then she like uses her feminine wiles or whatever to sleep with him in the pool or whatever.
Yeah, which is, I'll tell you though, I love that pool so
amazing.
much.
The pool's
I
amazing.
want to swim in that pool.
Yeah.
The movie I probably never am going to see again, but man, if I could have, I would visit the set of this movie in a second.
So she obviously knows, like, okay, I need to distract. Part of my job description is to distract him without him knowing I'm distracting. There's a little bit of like that, like Sharon Stone in Total Recall.
I was just going to say, yeah, like it reminded me a little bit of that. Like every piece of this movie, you could trace it back to another big budget sci-fi movie. It's like, oh, I've kind of seen that. Like Dark City has some bearing on this. I did see a review that compared it to 2001, which... That's insane. But, I mean, we talked about with Tron, you know, there are ideas, there's visual ideas in that that are directly, I mean, the hotel room sequence or the Jeff Bridges' character's lair in that movie is very much the Grand Hotel from 2001. The Tet, the shots of this mega structure in the distance have a sort of 2001 kind of feel. There's that same sort of tactile visual approach to things like space stations and robots and things in this movie that Kubrick was very much a fan of. Also, you get some of those Kubrick-esque compositions. So it is drawing from some pretty great sources. It's just not really doing it. Dark City is one of my favorite movies also. And, you know, all the stuff, the Meet Me in the Empire State Building, that kind of thing. I mean, it works better for me when it's Jennifer Connelly because literally everything works better when it's Jennifer Connelly. We'll get to her when we talk about Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, we'll get to her next week because
that's right.
Because
Yeah,
she's in Only the Brave.
Yeah.
So yeah, Riseborough's the only one to me. When she was on screen and she was doing her stuff, I was interested because I was like, what does she know? What doesn't she know? There's a couple scenes where she's almost acting like insane because obviously she's got these like competing things going on because she actually cares about him. Right?
Yeah.
She does actually, unlike the Sharon Stone thing, she does actually care about him, right? She loves him and she, like, as far as she knows, she loves him and she wants to be with him, you know, but there's all these other things going on.
I really like the scene of the second version of Vika. Like, that's one of the better scenes in the movie that kind of has just an interesting subtext going on, and like what we know, the dramatic irony of it is really interesting. If we could have done a little bit more of that, I would have liked that, I think.
Yeah, but way more interesting, right? If Vika at that point knows that there are clones and has some sort of like suspicion. Because otherwise it's just like, okay, it's just a guy acting weird like he always acts. It seems like all these jacks act weird.
They're all a little robotic, yeah.
So that's really performance-wise, and I think Freeman and to a more kind of Waldo are just like wasted. Like, why are they the people? I mean, Freeman when he first appears looks awesome, like, but it's such a design over function thing because he's wearing dark glasses in the middle of like the darkest room that's ever existed. But whatever, it looks cool, right? It looks cool.
It's very Book of Eli.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit through. We'll go quickly because again, like, there's not that much plot, but basically we start with that voiceover.
Like there's so much plot. Like there's not much plot in the movie, but like the stuff that we have to sort of internalize at the beginning is just like, and
that's the first mistake the movie makes. I feel like, because
like you almost want a Star Wars text crawl, but like maybe that would have been even worse.
For me, I would like to be dropped into that world. And again, this is part of the reason some of the stuff with like the crew's involvement, because Cruise famously likes to test his movies over and over and over again and really pay attention to what the audience says. They don't like this. They're confused by this. They want this to happen. They don't want this to happen. And he'll do stuff. He'll take himself out of the movie in certain points. I think it was in Jack Reacher. There was like a love interest thing where they actually like get together and the audience hated it and he took it out. He's like, got to do what the audience says. And I feel like the whole beginning is very much like either a studio or you know, audience note, or it's just Kosinski taking the wrong lessons from other studio notes. If you drop me into this world where without telling me really what's going on, I would be way more interested, right, for the first hour of that movie than I was watching the movie in actuality, because I would rather be confused trying to figure out what's going on than already be like, well, his memory was wiped 5 years ago. Why would they do that unless there was something nefarious going on? So obviously whoever he's working for is not actually the good guys. Obviously the bad guys are really the good guys. You already at the immediately, all the information dumped on you. No, that plus the like sepia toned version of like the New York stuff. It doesn't look like a movie, right? It doesn't look like a movie. It's one of those things where it's like either they decided this late or they repurposed it here in addition to where it comes later because the studio was like, we need something earlier to kind of show that Tom has a love interest and whatever. You know, like all of that stuff, it just, that first 5 minutes or whatever it is, 3 minutes or whatever it is, the movies are behind the 8 ball for me. You dump too much too quickly. I don't know what I'm supposed to hold on to and what I'm not. And also I feel like I know too much and too little at the same time.
All of this to me, it's that, what do they call it? Like putting a hat on top of a hat kind of thing, where it's like, you know, a sci-fi movie like this has to have like a concept that is the core of it. And like, this feels like 5 or 6 of them just kind of stacked on top of each other with the cloning, with the memory wiping, with the alien invasion, with the end of the world. Like there's just so many things that have to be put into place to make this story work. And because none of them really have any bearing on where it ends up going, for the most part, to me, I mean, I just, or maybe it's just I didn't care about any of them, but it's like so many things. And as I said, you're kind of like forced into that this movie like grabs you by the lapels and tells you, here is the history of everything that happened here. But we're seeing New York in the present day. Then we're getting Tom Cruise talking to God knows who in his beautiful apartment, which at least the visuals are distracting, right? It's like, I'm checking out the furnishings and the, like the bed that he wakes up in that scene is amazing looking. Like literally everything in that apartment is like, I want that. And again, it feels to me so much like a commercial. It feels like a piece of advertising. It feels like, I mentioned when we talked about Tron, like high fashion photography. And I love that stuff. You know, I'm an aesthetics guy. But is that enough to hang a movie on? And even for me, who really, really likes that stuff, I gotta say no, because I just have zero emotional investment in any of it. And like something about the way this movie opens, it's like, I kind of know that I'm never going to. You were saying that also. You said behind the 8 ball. I felt that way as well. I was like, okay, I really hope this movie looks cool and has some amazing action sequences because I don't care about this story already.
And then immediately we get the stuff with Cruise going out in the ship, and like I said, we gotta set the status quo, right? Like every story has to do. But there's just things in this opening thing which I just think are like, I don't know if they were in the script originally, if this is stuff that was put in later, but like the stuff with the bobblehead, like when he's talking to the bobblehead, I'm like,
that's such a desperate attempt at personality, and it almost worked for me. Like, the bobblehead is one of my favorite things in the movie, and I don't know who put it in there, but like, good on you. It was a good try. I respect it.
It was a good try, but man, it does not work. Like this is not a bobblehead is not a personality, and neither is this idea, right? And I understand why he's doing it, but you know, that whole scene where he's like in the football stadium where...
Oh, can we talk about that scene?
You know, yes, I want to talk about it because there was the voiceover. So I was like, okay, like I get it. You're trying to get all this information out. I don't like it, but like once we're into the world, let's just see how it goes, right? And then the Baba thing happens and I'm like, okay, but like I like the way it looks and I like kind of the score that's going on right now. So let's just see what happens. And then he lands that plane and he gets out and he does the like puts the Yankee hat on. And I'm like, okay.
Is that his same Yankee hat from War of the Worlds, by the way?
It looks like it. I thought the exact same thing. I'm like, Tom, stop acting like you're a Yankee fan. Like, I don't get this idea.
But that's it, right? Like everything feels like the simplest, most generic. I'm a Yankees fan, right? Like, but I am from the Northeast, right? Like, Yankee Stadium is an hour from my house, and I grew up liking that team. But like, if you're gonna give your character a baseball fandom in a movie, what is immediately the first thing you go to? It's the New York Yankees. That's just the way it is, right? So this scene, I'm a football fan also. And like, I remember this was a big part of the trailer. It might actually been the whole trailer, right? Where he lands in this like decrepit, abandoned football stadium. It says like, 2017. They couldn't say Super Bowl, but it's like World Championship.
It looks like a baseball.
Like
it looks like a baseball.
It does,
pennant.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. But so like he's narrating, like I guess he read about or heard about the last Super Bowl because the world ended essentially in 2017 in this movie. So that would have been the last time they played the Super Bowl. And the way this scene plays out, like this felt like not only a commercial, it felt like a Super Bowl commercial, right?
Yes,
like you're watching the big game, and it probably was. When did this movie come out in 13?
Oh, I don't. Let me see.
Was it summer?
I have this
Spring?
right here. I think it was a summer. It was. Oh, I don't have the date it opened. Oh, June. No, it came out theaters in June, so it must have been like May or April or something like that.
Okay, so
it feels like
it
feels like a March April release because it's not like a giant. Right, it's not like
it does, but I mean, either way, it's the kind of thing you would advertise during the Super Bowl, right?
Yes.
And this feels so much like, it's just so generic what he's talking. He like backs up and he's like acting out this whole thing. It's like the rookie quarterback tosses to the receiver. It's like it is the most generic. Like someone looked up what football is on Wikipedia and wrote this scene based on that. And it's like if this had any personality, if you used a proper name in this scene, like it's a cool idea for a scene. This guy who has never experienced the world at all, kind of like in this setting that should have this sort of sacred kind of feel about it. Like I love the idea. I hate the execution so much. Like, again, laughable is a word I used so much when I was kind of putting together my thoughts on this movie. But like you can kind of see exactly what they were going for, but it feels so crass. It feels like such an advertising thing. Like I'll bet that's how Tom Cruise talks about football also. Like Tom Cruise is kind of an empty person. And I like him as an actor. I enjoy his movies. I think he has a lot of charisma and a lot of screen presence. But like if you're trying to do anything to dispel that, this movie's not going to work at all because this scene, it's just so generic. It's just so, as I said, impersonal, and it just feels like this is a cool thing that we can do here, and this would be a great thing to have in a trailer. I hate when movies do stuff that's just like, this is just earmarked for the trailer, right? Like, what you want is to make a movie that has lots of fascinating stuff in it, and so when they're cutting the trailer together, it's like, okay, it's a wealth of stuff here that we can just pick from, and here's the coolest scenes. Not like, oh, this scene's definitely gonna, like, I don't remember exactly what the trailer was, but I know this scene was in it, and I know this was kind of like, I don't even remember any other actors being in the trailer, right? Like I don't think they revealed Morgan Freeman. I think it was all Tom Cruise kind of exploring this like post-apocalyptic world, and that was the scene they chose to kind of exemplify that, and it just doesn't work for me at all, and I just wanted it to be over. Like it was just cringeworthy. It was just painful to me, just as someone who could see the potential in an idea like that.
It's one of those scenes that makes me, I have a problem with feeling like uncomfortable in like situations where people are embarrassing themselves. I get very embarrassed
that's exactly
for
what
them.
It was.
And that's what I felt like. I felt like somebody who doesn't know anything about football talking about football. And it's like, Tom, like when Tom talks about like movies, I believe it 100%. Like he fucking loves movies. He loves extreme stuff.
He loves his movies.
He loves movies in general. Tom Cruise,
Have you ever heard Tom Cruise talk about other movies? I don't think
sure.
I ever have.
Yeah, for
really?
sure. He fucking loves movies. Like a dude loves movies. He watches a billion movies. He's just like, I believe him when he talks about that stuff. This, I don't believe it at all. I don't believe Joseph Kosinski cares about football. I don't, it's one of those things where it's like,
and it's like, fine, you don't have to, but then don't do this scene.
Yeah.
There's so many other things you could do.
Yes.
I love, like, one of the great cliches in this movie is like, every time they go down to the surface, right? Every location is like, we're in the New York Public Library. We're in the stadium where the last Super Bowl was ever played. Like, there's no just sort of like middle of nowhere locations, even though the whole thing, like the world is basically a desert, right? And there's some great shots. It's like New York City was decimated by a tsunami or something. So everything's just covered in dirt and the tops of the buildings are the surface. That's a cool visual idea, but it's like, it's the most generic version of that, right? It's like, oh, someone saw New York on Google Maps and it was like, all right, or Google Earth, right? And just made something based on that. I mean, this movie has no specificity in anything. And like that's why I like the bobblehead so much. You know, anything like that would make this so much better. Use a proper name, right? Use a proper noun. Talk about something like you've actually seen it, experienced it, know about it, rather than like so much of this just feels like a first pass. Like when I'm writing, sometimes it's like, okay, I got to get to the next page, so I will do the most generic thing possible, and then you go back and you fill it in, because what I love in movies, and it's one of the things I love about Quentin Tarantino so much, it's like you can tell what he loves. You know, when he drops a name, when he references something, it's because he really cares about that thing and he wants you to go look it up, right? He wants you to know who this person was, what this movie was, who played this song. This movie has none of, like, there's some pretty good needle drops in this movie, but they're also like very obvious. We get Procol Harum later on, which is an obvious choice, kind of a good one in a better movie, I think would be very well used. But I don't know, it feels robotic. It feels like it was written by an AI, and this scene to me is like the epitome. Like our mutual friend Brian Verderosa always talks about his movie snapshot. Like when he thinks about a movie, what is the couple of minutes of that movie, or what is the shot that sort of, you know, jumps into his mind? Like it's Bruce Willis in the air shaft in Die Hard, flicking the lighter, you know, come out to the coast. Like that's your snapshot of Die Hard. My snapshot of this movie is going to be that Super Bowl stadium scene, because it just, to me, it is exact. It's a microcosm for the entire thing. It is the most impersonal and cold and unfeeling. And I guess it's kind of going for that in some sense, but like I gotta feel something in this movie, and I feel literally nothing all the way through it.
My problem with it is, like, this movie is trying to be emotional. It advertises itself as a love story or whatever, and like this moment, this is generic. And it's all in the thing of like, well, if we give this kind of universal idea of like, this guy loves sports and football, and he'll be like, this is a regular guy that I can identify with because he likes sports and football. And so many movies get this wrong, and it's come so much from studios being wrongheaded about this stuff. Specificity is the way you get people to universally care about characters and things that happen in movies. The more specific you are, the more people will care. Because
real people don't talk like this. Real people don't think like this, right? Like, we love the things that we love, and we care about them, and we learn everything we can possibly. I mean, you know, maybe not to the extent that nerds like us do, but everybody kind of has those things that they care very much about, and they would never talk about them in this way, and they'd never approach them in this way. And again, he's a clone. He's basically a drone, a robot. There's the sort of correlation between him and the machines and all that stuff. But
it's like, not playing that. It's not playing that. That's the thing. If it was playing that, I would give it way more of a pass. If it was like one of those kind of stories where it's like, oh, I'm so far removed from this world that I can't quite get all the details right, but you can tell that I'm really like engaged with it. Like,
yeah, that could be really cute.
Yeah, like the newest Planet of the Apes movie. There's an ape who takes place hundreds of years after the last set of the Reeves movies. There's an ape like recounting like the stories of what happened in that movie, and he's getting a lot of details wrong, but he's doing it wrong because he's so far removed from it that he's kind of picking apart from what's been left behind, right?
Right.
You know?
Well, it's about personal experience.
Yeah.
I'll make the comparison I was going to make before, and maybe there's a conspiracy theory in this somewhere. The movie that this reminded me of a lot was Battlefield Earth. Okay. And you've seen Battlefield Earth, right?
I mean, I saw it probably when it was released. I don't remember much about it at all, except that it was terrible. Okay.
Oh, it's certainly terrible, but like even that does a better job of some of the things that this movie is trying to do. Mm-hmm. There's a scene, one of the okay scenes. I'm not saying it's a good movie. Don't end this partnership now just because I'm saying nice things about Battlefield Earth. But there's
what's your theta count? Your blood theta count?
I'm Xenu, actually.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah. That's definitely gonna get us canceled, right? In that movie, in the early going in that movie, so it's like 1,000 years in the future, which is ridiculous in and of itself, and humans have kind of reverted to this like primitive sort of state, and they show up in this setting, they're like hunting, you know, it's this real like hunter-gatherer sort of caveman sort of thing, and there's these animals there that are not moving, and it turns out to be a miniature golf course, like an overgrown miniature golf course, and like it's a reveal of this like piece of kitsch culture from like, you know, the 1900s that these characters stumble upon, and it's kind of a nice little surprise and kind of a fun moment in that movie. And like stuff like that would work really good here. And this movie just like can't even wrap its head around like why that scene kind of works. But like a miniature golf course, right? It's such a small and insignificant and not important part of human culture, right? So it's like, have him show up in a place like that and not know what it is, but be kind of fascinated by it. That's interesting, right? Like, I want to say some of the Mad Max movies kind of do that. Like every post-apocalyptic movie, they have their little things, right? Or like The Last of Us, those kinds of things, you know. They show up in a convenience store and like that's an interesting location. The stadium where they played the Super Bowl, the roof of the Empire State Building. It's like this movie's doing it just so you'd be like, oh look, it's the Empire State Building. We recreated the top of the Empire State Building and covered it in sand, and it feels so forced and so crass and so generic.
They're doing that chase when he's in the bubble ship or whatever, and the drone's chasing him, and they go to that ravine and like. The torch from the Statue of Liberty is in that ravine.
Oh, of course. I'm not one of those people where like suspension of disbelief is something that I can do. And particularly for a movie like this, I'm willing to give you, like, it's a partnership, right? Between us and the filmmakers, and we know this is fake, we know this is a movie. Science fiction is like that kind of in general, right? Like anything that is speculative, they never get it right? Like there's no movie that's ever been set in the era that we're in now that knows anything about the era we're in right now. They might have gotten a couple things right, but most things are incorrect. But this movie just doesn't have like it's just these obvious touchstones that kind of do nothing for me. And it's like, okay, I can't do both, right? Like, if you're going to do something like what Planet of the Apes does, you better be as good a movie as Planet of the Apes. And this is not.
If you can do something that works, I will let go of all of that stuff. I am not,
absolutely.
But the whole sort of like cinema sins, like kind of like culture really bothers me.
Yeah, I could. Yeah.
Because I'm like, a movie is not supposed to be a perfect puzzle you can put together that works in every end. It's representing something, and if it represents something well and can evoke emotion or reaction, that's all I care about. But this movie, these things stick out because the movie doesn't, and in many ways, watching it feels very much like a video game, right? In so many ways. There's so many aspects of this movie. I would play
this video game. Yeah, there's a lot of scenes in this movie where I was like, oh man, I want to fly this ship. I want to shoot down these drones with these cool ass looking guns. Like, there are definitely things that would work in that format here.
But what it does feel like is, you know, this happened a lot in like the mid to late 90s and the early 2000s, where like you get something like, you know, Silent Hill, which is like a Japanese creator trying to make a game that's based on
small town America,
yeah. But based on movies that he's seen. So it's like a double, it's a kind of crazy, a lot of filters, which ends up being something really special and cool. But it does feel like that here, where it's like, these people have never been to New York. They have never, like you said, experienced a football game, you know, all of these things. And it's like, that's what's missing from this movie in just about every aspect of it. Things like this don't work if you're not specific. Look at the great science fiction movies that kind of play in this space. They're all super specific. This, like you said, it just feels like it's pandering. It feels like
it's my first post-apocalypse.
Yeah, exactly. Again, the design stuff is cool. The ship looks cool. The bike is awesome. The bike was really rode it around fucking Iceland or whatever the hell they were.
Well, Joseph Kosinski is the guy that you get to get cool looking shots of Tom Cruise on a motorcycle. No one does it better. We'll get to Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, he's sitting on that cliff like face with the plant. Now it's old hat with these Tom Cruise stories, but this was right at the beginning when it was really becoming a thing, right? That he does all his own stunts, he does all this crazy stuff or whatever. And a lot of the features are about this. They're like, you know, Tom wanted to ride the bike, he wanted to do the thing, he wanted to flip around the thing. And it's like, yes, we know. He does whatever he does, but that stuff is really nice looking. And those are the only kind of moments, those kind of quiet, more serious moments, like him growing a little tiny plant to bring back to his wife because he wants to communicate, look, it's beautiful down here, right? I have a connection to it, right? That's at least somewhat specific, right? It's at least something that he's trying to do. That you know, she like tosses it away immediately or whatever.
Oh, Vika. Yeah, she's pretty cold, that Vika.
But she is very specific. And that's the thing about Riseborough, which she brings to it, is everything she does is incredibly specific, right? And
I love the way she drops it off the, this, I don't know how high that is. Like, I think it's, I don't know. Like, I thought they were just like in the sky the first time I saw it, and then you can kind of see the support structure of it. Reminded me a little of the nightclub in Tron Legacy.
Absolutely, yes.
These like structures that are like suspended very high in the air for no good reason. Like, I think a good wind would probably snap that thing off, but what do I know? But that does give you that wonderful shot, like from down below where she drops the plant in like a coffee can or whatever. Like stuff like that. That's at least somewhat tactile. That kind of feels like a thing that someone might do in a world like this.
But the thing is, like, they don't spend enough time, I think, setting up the emotional stakes of what the Cruise character actually cares about, right? They do it in these big, broad things. He talks about football. He's got his little, like, his Little Mermaid cave where he brings all the stuff back, and he's like, "What is this? A dingle hopper?" And he puts it on the shelf, and he, you know, but yeah, if there was more of that tone, that would be something.
Set at, like, I don't know if you get these. Maybe it's the algorithm just kind of knows what I like, but like, you know, high end like outdoors clothing stuff like that. That looks like one of those ads, one of those catalogs.
Absolutely, it does
not feel like a real place at all.
No.
Nor does you know, Garrett Hedlund's apartment in Tron Legacy.
No.
Nor does Pete Mitchell Maverick's hangar that he lives in Top Gun Maverick.
I'm like, how rich are you, Pete? Like, you're an Navy pilot. I don't think you can afford to live this place. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. But
but there's this certain aesthetic thing that is like, you know, like there's a way to make that look both beautiful, but also like made by human hands and not made by set designers, right?
Yes. But they're like, again, but the way he interacts with all these objects and stuff, again, there is no, I jokingly brought up the Little Mermaid before, but if there was more of that vibe to how he dealt with these like relics of, it would be way different, but it just feels like
he puts on his vinyl record. What's the first one he puts on? It's like also like, it's one of the top 5 most obvious choices of like what someone would find and put on as a record. Then he goes and sits outside. He takes a little nap. Like
all this stuff should make him feel like, oh my God, these are relics from a past I don't remember, I don't understand, but I wish was still here. But the vibe you get from Cruise's performance is, no, I know what all of this stuff is. I know what all of it does. I experienced all of this. That's what the vibe you get from him, even though the story is telling you something completely different, right? And I think that incongruity is difficult because it doesn't let you get connected to the character in any way. And then he finds that sort of like beacon that's in the Empire State Building or whatever that's sending out the signal, and they don't know what it's for, and they figure out, oh, it's leading to this area. What's there? Nothing. The whole time you're seeing him kind of stalked, right, by these people.
Scabs.
These scabs. Or these aliens.
Well,
these aliens.
We do think
I'm
they're
sorry.
aliens.
These aliens. Yes. We're supposed to think they're aliens. From the moment I see them, I'm like, these are people. There's no way these aren't people. There's absolutely no way. There's just no way they're not people. They don't kill him. They're just watching him all of the time.
They could be humanoid aliens. Could be a Star Trek kind of thing. I kind of thought they were going in that direction.
I had to put in my notes, like right away, I was like, these are people. Like immediately. Because I was like,
I thought so too, but I was like, oh, maybe this will surprise me in some way. But
yes. No. And I was like, there's the people, and whoever's talking to her on the screen is an AI. That was immediately what I was thinking. It's just, I've played too many video games. I've seen too many genre stories. I've read too many genre books.
This is post-Bioshock, right? Yeah, it's totally post-Bioshock.
Yeah, it's post-Bioshock, yes.
In fact, I think it's same year as Infinite.
For sure. And, you know, so basically all this stuff kind of happens. The water farmer blows up or whatever. So that's
those things are awesome looking too.
They look amazing. And what they're doing is really cool. But then he goes, you know, basically the ship crashes and he goes there and there are all these pods and the drones blow him up, except for the one that looks like the woman he's been having the visions of. And he brings the thing back to his house. And there's one dynamic I do like. I like this idea, like this like power structure of the dwelling, which is that like he can't get back in if she doesn't let him back in.
Yep.
That sort of like dynamic I like.
Especially the glass door. So they're looking each other directly in the eye. It's not like through a screen or anything like that. I love that.
Yeah. And like it feels like she knows, right? Almost immediately like what's going on, right? Like that this has happened. And then we get this scene, right, between the three of them, which is so much like that Tron dinner scene where they're once again sitting around a table in a weird white apartment where they're having an uncomfortable dinner scene where there's all this like unspoken sort of like weirdness between the three of them. I will say this, Olga Kurylenko in this movie, she's not given much to do. And at the beginning, I was like, okay, is she going to inject some sort of life into this movie, right? You get the idea that she knows something that these two characters maybe don't know, right? She knows more of a truth than they know. We are given sort of like this, you know, I need to go and find the flight recorder so you need to hear it, Jack. And I'm like, this is one of the things I'm like, just tell him what's going on. Like, you can just tell him. He obviously is sort of like open, right, to this idea that something is weird is happening. But she won't tell him, so they go back to the place, and the scavs come, and I skipped over the whole thing where he got dragged down into the library or whatever. All these action scenes are just fine for the most part. I like the one where he finds the crash site and he's looking for the survivors or whatever and trying to protect her.
There's some moments it's trying so hard to set up like what the weaknesses of the drones are, but I never quite had that figured out, and I feel like it didn't work. Like, I don't know, this, what we find out is like an alien super intelligence. It's pretty stupid for something of that magnitude, right? Like, it doesn't build these drones in a particular way that seems like the best way to do it. And if you are a super intelligence of some kind, I feel like you'd figure it out. That don't give them an obvious weak point, which I don't know exactly what it is, but they clearly have one. There's just guns that can kill them. I don't know, there wasn't a single action scene in this that really kind of got me all fired up. And that's a thing that I really like in movies, where it's just an action where you know exactly what the stakes are. You have a really good sense visually of where everyone is, you know, who's shooting at who and what they're hiding behind. And there's one very cool shot. It's very, very late in the movie where a drone, one of these spherical drones, is kind of flying through the rebels' base, right? And it's like traversing multiple floors, and we're just kind of following it, this like swooping, like very fast moving camera, and it looks really cool, but also I can't really tell what it's doing or what's going on. I just feel like that's a scene that might be cool in IMAX or something like that. And like, I don't know, even the Tom Cruise versus Tom Cruise fight, I was like, that's okay. I see that. Like, I see those two kind of squaring off against each other. I was like, this is going to be awesome. And then it kind of just, I don't know, it's your average everyday fight scene.
Yeah, I like that first scene where he's discovering the crash site, because I think from a storytelling perspective, it's like a good at communicating the situation that's in, the stakes, right? We up the stakes, the drones kill the people.
Well, the chaos of that, I think, really works well. You know, there's just fire and explosions, and
it's tactile. Like, you can feel it, and that's what I liked about that scene. Once we get into like the chase scenes when they're in like the gyrocopter or whatever, those scenes I'm much less into, because I just feel like they have, like you said, they have no stakes in many ways. But
let me say one thing, though, because I mean, we're coming down pretty hard on this filmmaker that we're going to be spending the next few weeks talking about. We've got several films to go. Having seen Top Gun Maverick, like, Joseph Kosinski eventually gets it, right? Like, I think the action scenes in that movie are incredible, and we know exactly what's going on at all times. They are shot in exactly the way they need to be shot and choreographed in the way they need to be shot. They obviously use real planes. They blew up a lot of real stuff in that movie, and it works. It's just like, you know, it's like they are the best version of those scenes that they could possibly be. Here, again, I feel like all of these scenes could work if they were just done better. And that's, you know, it's only his second movie. And like, I felt the same way about Tron. Like, Tron Legacy was kind of lacking in action. And even some of those action scenes were just like, here's like kind of your generic, like, wire work kind of martial arts fight in the club. We talked about that on the last episode. And here, there's an awful lot of that. Like, there's very few, like, every once in a while when someone is pointing a gun at one of these drones that have a bunch of guns of their own, and they're kind of firing back and forth at each other. I kind of like those scenes where they're almost like playing chicken, where it's like, who's going to get blown up first? That's how Morgan Freeman's character kind of meets his fate at the end of this movie. I kind of liked that, but like, that's not an interesting action scene, you know? That's just like a robot and a person firing guns directly at each other, like looking directly at each other.
Yeah. Well, the main difference I think between
this
and Tron is the aesthetics of Tron are just more interesting, right? Like the light, the bar turning into a light cycle, all that stuff. It just has, I think, more gusto to it. But also, there's a minimal amount of actually caring about the characters involved in the action scenes in Tron. And here, I just feel like you don't have that involvement. I think that's the main difference here. I think they're finely staged. I don't think they're confusing to look at. I think, you know, they're clear and concise in the way they're made. That's not his problem. It's just that I don't have any clear feeling or investment one way or the other how these things are going to go, right? Like, when we have that moment where like Olga Kurylenko's character is about to die, apparently, I'm like, okay, like, what? I know she's not gonna die because they just introduced her like 2 minutes ago, and there's no other
and that's
characters
dispensed with
in this
very
movie.
quickly. Also, I guess everybody knew she wasn't going to die because that kind of happens, and then it's over, and it's, well, not that big of a
There's
deal.
no other characters in this movie. She can't be gone, but they do this thing where we get the reveal, right, that the scabs are people. Morgan Freeman's the leader. Nicholas Coster-Waldau is like the second in command, who like has nothing to do except
he's moderately distrustful of Tom Cruise's character, but what's it, Jack Harper?
Jack Harper.
Such a generic name. Yeah. I will say I liked the moment. I think it is Nikolai Coster-Waldau who delivers this line, something, or it's a conversation between him and Morgan Freeman where like something about this one being different. And that's kind of the first inclination you get that this is a clone situation, that like this has happened in some sense before. Like they captured an earlier version or a different version of Jack Harper, and it just didn't work. Like he's supposed to be their savior. He's going to be the one who delivers the nuke to the alien superstructure, kind of just like exactly in Independence Day, but fine. Whatever. So many movies this one just kind of is derivative of. But I like that idea because, I don't know, that like that's one of the things. The idea of the clones, it's too much. It's putting a hat on top of a hat. It's another thing. I was going to say another movie, but I don't want to spoil that for people who haven't seen it.
Okay.
So I won't even say what it is. Maybe
I think I know what movie you're talking about. I was thinking about that movie early on in this movie. I was like, is this this movie situation? Like that,
a sci-fi movie from a couple of years before this one?
Yep.
Starring a really fun actor and kind of by himself. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Boy, I wanted to be watching that movie at some of these during this one.
Absolutely.
But I did like that idea, and I that sort of spun things in a direction that I was moderately interested in. And it was just like involvement in this movie was very hard for me, and I wanted to really like this. Like, this is in my wheelhouse. This could have been my jam. And every time I was like, oh man, maybe it's gonna like turn the corner. It never really did, but I always kind of was rooting for it in some sense. And that was a moment where I felt, and it wasn't because of the performance. Jamie Lannister is just, he's there. He replaced him with literally any good looking dude or woman. It doesn't really matter even who that character is. Maybe a female character. You could add another female character there and do nothing with her like you do with the others. But I did kind of like that idea. I will tell you, the one thing that I wanted to see in this movie that we didn't get, and it's set up, and like we're doing so many flashbacks and so many reveals. So the invasion, the alien invasion, quote unquote, in this movie is these ships show up and there's like thousands upon thousands of Tom Cruises in them because he was the commander of the shuttle that encountered the alien intelligence. And so he was cloned, and his co-pilot, Andrew Riseborough's character, she was cloned also. I want to see the army of Tom Cruise clones. Why don't we see that? What a cool scene that would be, is just 1,000 Tom Cruises just like destroying an American city.
Yeah, absolutely. At least then you have been like, wow, this movie was bad, but like, you gotta watch it because this one scene was freaking crazy, man.
I think that's what they wanted the Cruise versus Cruise fight to be, but like, that's not that exciting. That would have been really exciting.
No, because also we've seen actors fighting themselves before in other things.
Yes, we have.
You know, that's the other thing. It's like, this is not special. Like, again, and this is probably because like I think the movie telegraphs its reveals a little bit too much. When they were like, oh, who's this person who landed in this ship? I'm like, it's obviously another Tom Cruise. Like, there's no way it's not. You know? And the thing is, like, when the other movie you were mentioning, right? The other movie that dealt with clones. When you bring up the subject of clones like this, one of the most, it's a real, I think that people do all the time, but I think is always fascinating. It's like, okay, but what makes somebody a person? What makes somebody the real one? What is the situation here? This movie is just like, it doesn't matter. They're all the same. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah,
and
it wants to have it every possible. Like, there's some Blade Runner ideas in this as well, but it's definitely not Philip K. Dick. It's a long way from that.
There's that one scene where Jack is like, I know I'm not him. Like, I know I'm not him. I have his memories. They're not really my memories. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, we're getting like interesting territory. And she's like, no, you are him. Like,
you're right. Well, the fact that he doesn't kill himself, right? He incapacitates Tom Cruise version 2, and then that becomes important later on, which you know it's going to, right? Like, nobody forgot about him. Like, this movie I don't want to say it's a little bit insulting to the audience's intelligence, but I kind of think it is. It does these things where it's like, we're going to plant this seed and you're going to be so caught up in everything else that's going on that you're going to forget about it. And I never did, not once. And I was like, I wonder when we're going to see Tom Cruise version 2 again. I bet there's going to be another, well, I thought it was going to be another cool fight scene. It wasn't. Like, I mean, there's the action scene that we talked about before with the drone kind of destroying a bunch of the rebel complex. And then the final scene in this movie is Tom Cruise talking to a triangle.
It is. Though I will say, like, if there was more stuff in the movie, like Tom Cruise talking to a triangle, sure, I would have been more entertained by the movie all the way through.
If the triangle had anything interesting to say, like, you're a Matrix Revolutions Reloaded.
I'm a Matrix Reloaded
architect.
Super fan.
Yeah, we've talked about this.
Yeah.
I really like that scene with the architect, you know, because he says some interesting stuff and it makes you think stuff.
Yeah.
This is just like, all right, just kill this thing. I've had enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, again, another one of the reveals that is not a reveal to me is like, guess what? Julia's not actually in the space coffin. It's Morgan Freeman. And I'm like, yeah, obviously he wasn't going to take his wife up to be killed.
I never understood like the rules of that, where it's like, it's got to be another human in there, but it didn't have to be that particular human. But this alien super intelligence that knows everything about everything just kind of is easily fooled by that.
Wouldn't she be able to tell that like it was different vital signs than a healthy...
You could like scan the DNA or something. Yeah. There's got to be a way.
There's got to be a difference in the vital signs of a dying 75-year-old man and a perfectly healthy 28-year-old woman. There has to be different in the vital signs. So like, again, that's what I'm talking about. Like, there's just this underlying sense of like, and I said earlier, stupidity. I don't want to be harsh about it, but it does this thing in genre movies that, you know, gets under my skin a lot, which is it takes a lot of shortcuts.
Well, it's almost like we don't care and we don't think you're going to care.
Yeah. It's not even that. It's like, you will care about the good guys because we tell you they're the good guys, and you will not like the bad guys because we tell you they're the bad guys. And then when we switch them up, you'll be like, whoa, now I care about the people I thought were bad, but are actually good. And I care, you know, whatever. But it gives you no reason, right, to care or not care about any of them. I mean, it gives you lots of reasons not to care, you know, about all of them. The fact that like she has a kid at the end, you know, and I'm also like, how many years? Like the kid is like 5.
Is that Tom Cruise's kid? Is that Suri?
I don't even know. I have no idea. But that kid is like, it's been many years that she's been living in this little cabin by herself.
Took them a long time to find her.
I know. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then like, it's just like, well, I guess this Tom Cruise will do at the end. And I'm like, I don't understand what you're trying to communicate to me in this movie. Like I kept waiting for another reveal to be like, well, no, this clone that was here.
Oh, you like the clone went up to destroy the Tet, and the real Jack Harper Tom Cruise is the one that shows up at the end.
Or just like,
that would be fun.
That'd be fun. Or like the idea, even that scene earlier when he's like, I'm not the real him, and she's like, I don't, whatever. There'd be some reveal where it's like, no, this was the real Jack Harper who they put in like stasis. Who they had the one real one that was still around or whatever.
Yeah. I like that,
you know,
too.
But like this was just like, no, they all have his memories. And so what are they? Are there 60 of them?
It's a Tom Cruise hive mind.
Are there thousands of them still around the world? They're all going to want to marry Julia.
What happens when another one shows up? Yeah, you're absolutely right.
They're all
well, I'm sorry to tell you, Suri, you've got like 10,000 daddies, and they all look exactly the same.
Exactly. It doesn't
Tom
make sense.
Cruise Battle Royale, that'd be fun.
Also,
Oblivion 2.
I don't understand. Again, the only reason I bring this up is because the movie seems to want to present this stuff to you as stuff you should care about. What is the state of the world at the end of this movie? The moon is still gone, right? Most of the world's resources have been drained. I don't understand what the living conditions are going to be for these people. Are they all going to live in like Tom Cruise's...
Well, the little valley that he has apparently planted all by himself or something, that is going to propagate human civilization again. And too bad about the moon. We'll figure something else out.
Well, I will say, to speak about stuff I did like, and it kind of goes with what I said before about the Vic character having like the power dynamic. When they come back, she's sort of like seen them on the camera being romantic on the Empire State Building, and she won't let him in, right? And she says like, you know, we are not an effective team. We got to up the stakes now. So you've seen the regular Trones, But in order to kill these two, we've got Super Drone that's going to come out of their basement and kill them. Super Drone, they actually built it. In the special features, they actually built that fucking thing, which is pretty cool. But like, it comes out and it like, I don't even understand what happens because of the way it's like, they don't want to show Andrea Riseborough's character being disintegrated, like that person who was in like the turret Jeep in with the scabs. You just see Tom Cruise like standing there and he gets like shot in the chest by the beam or whatever that kills Andrea Riseborough, but it just knocks him over. And I don't.
Yeah, it's the most unceremonious death for her. Yeah, she's like a major character. There's so few major characters in this movie, and she's just like there and then she's gone.
Again, there are these little things that if the movie wants us to care about these people, this is why you give characters death scenes or moments right before they're dying where they can do one thing.
Like, how does Jack Harper handle that, right? Like, he clearly cares for her in some sense. I mean, she's not his real wife or whatever, but yeah, if you just vaporize her, then you don't even get that scene of him kind of contending with, like, you know, it's just very convenient for him. It's like, all right, I guess I can go do my thing with Olga Kurylenko now.
Yeah, but even if she's like, oh, like the last thing she does is she's mortally wounded, she like hits a button that lets them out of the building even though they're locked in or whatever it might be, give her some moment to say goodbye. And then that last moment where the AI is kind of like, you should come up, Jack, and we'll you know, everything will be fine or whatever. I'm like, why? You have no other, you're an all-knowing super intelligence. Your only recourse to stop this person was just one big drone. Like, can't you like remotely blow up their house or something in this moment?
Why does it need him to come back anyway? Like, they keep talking about that, like, through the whole thing. Like, oh, because they need to stage the climax of the movie somewhere, and we've got to see inside. Now that we know what this thing is, we got to see the inside of it. It's not that exciting anyway. No. So yeah,
we do get a Tom Cruise farm though. We do get a Tom Cruise farm when they come in. A very Matrix, obviously. I was just rewatching the Matrix. I rewatched the Matrix yesterday because I was like, I need something to like clear my palate.
Do you think there actually is one of those somewhere? Do you think Tom Cruise is just like, you know, like he died a long time ago doing a stunt for a Mission Impossible movie, and they just wake up the next Tom Cruise clone from the Tom Cruise farm? It's like, all right, we're doing Fallout now. We're doing, what's the new one called?
Well, Dead Reckoning was the newest one.
Dead Reckoning. Yeah.
I
feel like that's a DARPA project. There's just a bunker somewhere in America with just like 1,000 Tom Cruises that can be deployed strategically for anything.
If I gave Tron like a 6 last time, this is like a 4. After seeing this, very interested to see what Only the Brave is and how it works. Because after seeing this, the idea of it stripping it down to just being about character and relationships doesn't fill me with the most amount of confidence, but I'm hoping that I'm wrong, right? That's what I'm really hoping for.
I think, like in Top Gun Maverick, the character stuff works, and I think it continues to work throughout that movie, and it does have that nice little, you know, it's a jingoistic military movie, but like the camaraderie between those characters and the fact that Tom Cruise's character is older and wiser and is trying to be kind of a father figure in that, I think it nails that stuff, and we'll definitely talk about that when we get to it. So maybe it's like, so we know he can do really amazing things visually, and maybe it's just a process of developing that more sort of human side of things. And maybe Only the Brave is the movie where that happens, right? Like it could be, or at least partially, so we can have a little bit more investment in it than in this. But yeah, I'm right there with you with the 4. Like it's not that we're here to rate movies anyway, but it is, you know, we're kind of charting this filmmaker's career, and there's some things that are, I think, still missing at this point that are more glaringly obvious in this movie than they were in Tron Legacy. And it's a little disappointing because he's not working in that franchise framework here. He's not under the thumb of Disney, who's looking for this to be like a continuation of something from the early 80s, kind of this beloved cult film, or, you know, whatever you want to call Tron. This feels so much like it's like the impression of the impression of a movie rather than a movie. It's like the thought of what a movie might look like. I feel like I read this somewhere, some review or something. Someone said, like, this is the movie that, like, when a character is in another movie are watching a big budget movie, like in a scene in that movie, like, you know, two characters are out on a date or something and they go see like the sci-fi summer blockbuster. They go see Oblivion and they look up at the screen and this is what they're seeing. I definitely got that feel from it. Whoever said that, brilliant take on it. I agree 100%.
Absolutely. And the thing you mentioned, like, it's an impression of another movie, and this can be done to effective means and non-effective means, right? There are plenty of, but a movie that I often mention in this regard is the Todd Phillips Joker movie, right? Which obviously was a gigantic hit and people loved it. It won Joaquin Phoenix an Academy Award. But watching that movie, all I'm like is like, this is an impression of better movies that he's just sort of like squeezed into this framework that people will go see because it's got a character that they know, right? I don't like the Joker really at all, but that is an example of being it's a much more effective example of looking at other better filmmakers than yourself and grabbing the things from them and putting them into something and creating the impression of a good movie, right? And it's Joaquin
Phoenix a lot too.
Right,
like, you cast the right person to play that role, and like, he clearly has taken that and running with it and chewing scenery and doing his thing. And even Robert De Niro is really good. And I know he's made some kind of clunkers over it, but he's obviously a very good actor, and he does well in that movie. And he's kind of doing a certain thing that I think he pulls off really nicely. Like, that movie works.
And that movie looks really nice as well. So there's like a lot of parallels to me.
Well, I was going to ask you, so how do you feel about Edge of Tomorrow?
I love Edge of Tomorrow.
I do too. I like the original title better.
I don't think here's my hot take.
All you need is the graphic novel is called All You Need Is Kill, which is awesome.
My hot take on the Edge of Tomorrow title situation is that none of them are good. I think All You Need Is Kill is like a fun joke title for a manga or a comic book. It's not the name of a movie. I think Edge of Tomorrow sounds like a presentation that they would give at a corporate retreat about the future of shareholder value.
Well, that sounds like a very generic science fiction movie, like what this one is, and that one actually has a little bit of personality.
And Live, Die, Repeat is, again, I think, which they kind of sort of renamed it to, I think is also not a great name, though more descriptive.
It's a little better, but
more descriptive of what it actually is. When Cruise is often at his best, it's when he's going, you know what my star persona is, and I'm going to subvert it and play off of it in a way that will really entertain you. Like, that's what's so, I mean, Magnolia is like the hypothesis of this, right? It's like the apotheosis of this. It's like, here's all of my intensity and charm completely turned inside out. Collateral is similar to this, right? It's like, here's all my intensity that people love, but it turned vile, right?
I can't believe we haven't mentioned Collateral until now. Yeah, that movie's great too.
Edge of Tomorrow goes like, he's this really put together, charming, can talk his way out of anything guy, and again, turns itself on its head on that, right? That movie, of course, again, wonderful supporting performance by Emily Blunt, right, as well. He's got more to work with. I think Doug Liman is one of those people we'll probably end up talking about at some point. Very interesting, can be a very interesting director when he's given the right project.
Good excuse to watch Go for the first time in 25 years.
It's fascinating career, Doug Liman, right? Just a fascinating career.
A lot of good movies in there too. And there was the one, what's the movie he made that cost like $200 million that like barely got released? I want to see that.
Oh, is it I don't know. Which one is that?
Tom Holland?
Oh, Chaos Walking. Chaos Walking.
Yeah. That's the one.
Yeah.
I think that was him.
But you know, I think like Oblivion, if Oblivion was going to be the movie it was, like, forget about changing anything, forget about tuning things. The performance you need there is, you need like a Joaquin Phoenix, exploding star kind of, you need like a Robert Downey Jr., like, I'm just going to make this thing morph and change around me, and I'm going to bring all the personality and stuff to it that doesn't exist otherwise. That's what you need at the center of a movie like this. If the movie is going to be the version of the movie we got, right?
Does this movie like shoot itself in the foot like just from the get-go because this character is a clone and he's not a real person in some sense? I mean, so you can't really do that? Like, is it kind of restricted in that area?
But if you have an actor who can make scenes interesting regardless of the material, then you can at least have something that's interesting to watch, right? Like that is kind of
like if Jeff Bridges is the commander of that shuttle mission and they clone him 1,000 times and he destroys the world and then becomes
clone a more interesting man than Jack Harper.
Or you go completely in the other direction, just make him Garrett Hedlund.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is like Cruise is doing a lot of the Hedlund thing. Like they feel very similar in a lot of ways. Like in this situation, you need somebody who's got more going on in their performance than Cruise has in this movie. You know, like Jeremy Renner would have been better at this than Tom Cruise would have been, because at least Renner has like that seething sort of like intensity, anger that's always there. You can't have Tom Cruise, who is sort of empty vessel, playing an empty vessel. It just doesn't really work for his persona.
That makes sense.
You know?
For sure.
He's just very flat in it. God bless Kirilenko. I'm not impugning her as an actress at all, but Chastain would have made every scene that they were in together better. She's just a more interesting actress with less material. That's the thing with stuff like this. You need somebody who's good at taking bad material and elevating it. You can't have somebody who plays down to the material. It just doesn't work. We talked about Michael Sheen in Tron Legacy. That's what you need. You need somebody who's like, what the hell is this? You know?
Oh, if there could be like one supporting character in this movie, like it doesn't have to be that. You don't have to do this like sort of theatrical David Bowie thing, but like one supporting character that like has a little bit of like kind of sort of Morgan Freeman, but no, he's just Morgan Freeman. Like
he's just bringing you the gravitas.
Like it's like plug these actors who you know their persona, you know what they do on screen, just put them into the exact role. Like it's just, I don't know. I like square pegs and round holes, and this movie's like it's definitely round pegs and round holes.
Yes, it's smooth as possible. Everything is as smooth
it is. Just
as
like
possible.
the surfaces, just like the bubble ship.
Yeah,
very sleek, very professional.
Yeah,
feels like an Audi commercial.
You know who would have been really good, and again, not to give away what we were talking about before, Sam Rockwell would have been much better, because again, he brings this sort of like live wire energy. And you're like
someone who could improv during that stadium scene. Yes. Would be so much fun in this.
Yeah. And would bring a little weirdness to it, right? I think with someone like Rockwell, you get across the fact that this guy doesn't really know what he's talking about, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm like, what am I, that is what you need in those situations.
Or like a Colin Farrell. I mean, he could do these kinds of movies.
I love Colin Farrell. The thing is, like 2013 Colin Farrell, you're getting like Total Recall Colin Farrell. So you're not really getting,
I guess that's true.
You're going to get the same type of performance.
We are in a little bit of a Colin Farrell renaissance right now, and I'm all for it.
Yeah. I mean, I love Colin Farrell. You need to give him something interesting to do. I mean, that was problem. I mean, I'm sure we'll do a Colin Farrell movie at some point, but like that was the thing about Colin Farrell is like the history of Hollywood is littered with good-looking character actors getting misidentified as leading men in movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Colin Farrell has a ridiculously good-looking face, so they were like, "You're gonna be the boring romantic lead in 15 movies or whatever." And it's like, no, I'm actually way better as like a manic weirdo in things. Like I want to put on a fat suit and talk with a weird fake Brooklyn accent and be the Penguin. You know what I mean? Like that's like.
I wouldn't be excited about that, except that he is in it, and now I'm really excited about that.
But that's just like, it's just Kosinski doesn't feel like a guy right now to me who he gets gifted with Bridges and Tron, right? Bridges comes along with Tron, so there's nothing you can do. Bridges is coming, so you're gonna get the weird Bridges energy. Yeah, he doesn't feel like a guy who likes weird energy. Right in movies.
No, and I'm with you. Like movies kind of need weird energy, right? They need personality. They need that little spark. And good movie again, Edge of Tomorrow is a great example. Like Edge of Tomorrow is the great version of this. Like it's a similar budget, it's a similar genre. It kind of does a lot of things that relatively close to what this movie's doing. And yeah, this one just like. And again, I really wanted to like this movie. Like I went into this, like I thought, like hidden gem, undiscovered thing. I remember reading the reviews at the time. I was like, maybe it was just because of what Tom Cruise was at that time and nobody liked him. And it was kind of, all right, we're not going to give this movie the credit that it probably deserves. And I don't even mind a little generic, right? Like if the story was bad, if the script was, I think in the Rotten Tomatoes description of this, it's thinly written or something like that, which that's a wild understatement. But at the time, I didn't know that. But even that, I would have been okay with that if it just had something for me. And again, surfaces like on like you put this movie on in the background, turn the sound off, and just look at certain not all of it. Like I think all the post-apocalyptic stuff in this movie is pretty poor. Not that it looks cheap, it looks bad. It doesn't look interesting. Whereas the apartment, the ships, the the vehicles, there's some things that definitely do look cool, but it's not like, Tron Legacy, you could totally, like, any frame of that movie, it's like, oh, that's cool to look at. This one doesn't really have that, there's parts of it that kind of look like, knockoff George Miller. There's parts of it that kind of look like knockoff Stanley Kubrick, but not in an interesting way.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like speaking of George Miller, I just, I saw a couple weeks ago, I saw Furiosa to time date when we're doing this, and there is nobody more specific than George Miller, right? Like, George Miller is like, every single character in this, no matter what they are, you will remember them.
Yeah, Fury Road was like I haven't seen Furiosa yet, but like, all those female characters that like would have been nothing in any other movie. It's like, no, we kind of get to, like, I'm not sure we know their names, but we know a little bit about every single one of them, and we like them all. And all the villains in that movie, they're all fascinating, and like, you want to see more. Like, you could have done any, like, take whatever character. I mean, Furiosa is the obvious choice, but take any one of those characters, do a prequel based on them, and you've got a pretty interesting movie there. I don't want to see these characters in anything else. Like,
oh my God, please, no. Please.
Like, the prequel, like, this makes $1 billion, and they're like, okay, we're going to do the Jack Harper Intrepid Space Explorer movie.
You and I have talked about, off mic, our great love for the movie Pandorum, right? Mm-hmm. Which is,
that movie's weird.
It's a very weird movie. It's definitely a B movie, right? It's, Ben Foster, sometimes he slices off a little too much ham for me. I
love that guy.
In some movies.
He slices off just enough ham for me.
In Pandorum, again, the thing, you have somebody with like this, again, it deals with some of the similar concepts, right, that we're talking about in this movie. And there is a weird, like, humanity because of how weird a specific Ben Foster is to that character that doesn't exist, here in Oblivion.
There's a movie he's in, I can't remember, I think it's called Hostage. It's a very generic title. It's a Bruce Willis
movie. Yeah,
You've seen that, right?
Yeah, of course.
He's like the villain in that, and he is so much fun in that movie. Like, I'll watch Ben Foster in almost anything too. I like those are the kind of actors I really, really like. I get why Tom Cruise is a movie star, but I don't know. I guess I'm not a movie star guy. Like, I want to see people who are a little weird and a little quirky and can go off in those directions that you're not expecting them to. And like, I remember very, very little about that movie, but I remember him in it, and he was a lot of fun and crazy and weird, and it was exciting. And like, yeah, Pandorum is like that too. It's not a great movie, but it doesn't, like, there's things you can see in Pandorum that you can't see anywhere else. And that, to me, that means something. Like, we are people who have seen a shit ton of movies, and, to our credit and to our detriment, right? Because I think it makes it harder to make an impression on it. Like, I could see, like, I was watching Oblivion, and, I grew up with these kinds of movies. My dad was a huge influence on me as a film fan, and he really liked sci-fi, and I could see him taking me to see this in the early 90s if it had come out. And I would have thought it was awesome. If I was a fifth grader and we went to see this movie and it has some really cool looking stuff in it, I would have been really into this. And later on, I would have watched it and be like, oh man, my dad took me to see this movie. Oh, this doesn't hold up at all. But it is like, I mentioned, like, my first post-apocalypse. I do feel like if you're a little kid and you haven't seen a Tom Cruise action movie, you haven't seen a big budget sci-fi thing like Edge of Tomorrow, this could be a nice little gateway drug for something like that. But it's not going to hold up at all when you go back and watch it later on.
No.
So,
and the thing I'll say is, like, again, we talk about the kind of the era that Tom Cruise is in right now in this movie. Tom Cruise, I don't want to paint his career as him being someone who is always like a generic person in all of his movies. He's had we talked about some of very interesting performances, and I do feel like the stuff he's done with, he's really only doing Mission Impossible movies now, right? He kind of felt like, was like, this is the safe haven for me. I'm going to do these movies until I can't do them anymore.
Or he's taking other movies like The Mummy and just basically making them Mission Impossible movies.
Yeah. But I mean, Mummy itself was 10 years ago at this point. So it's like, it's just Mission Impossible now. And Top Gun. He'll throw in the Top Gun. Because he's been trying to make that movie for a long time. But in those Mission Impossible movies, he has, over time, turned Ethan into kind of a little bit of an eccentric weirdo in a lot of ways. And the way he does the action scenes, he's no longer being like, I'm the cool action guy. Every action scene he's in, he's much more Bruce Willis-y in those action scenes where he's like...
Tom Cruise is like, I give him credit for this also. He's a very good-looking action hero movie star guy who has no problem getting his ass kicked all over the place.
And he doesn't care about looking dumb either. He doesn't care about looking dumb. He'll do like weird action things where he'll like... he'll miss a jump, or he'll do a thing, or he'll look stupid. When he's used and deployed properly, in those ways, he's an interesting screen presence, you know, to me, 100%. So I don't want to pass it off like I think Tom Cruise is like a boring person. He's usually good at making nonsense more interesting because he's just good. He just learned how to do it over the years, and he can't do it in this movie. He can't make it more interesting. There's not enough there to make it interesting.
Can I ask a question that's kind of going back to Oblivion? What's the significance of the title of this movie?
I don't know.
Okay.
It sounds cool.
I thought I missed something.
It sounds cool.
Does it? It just reminded me of Videodrome, which is such a better movie than this. That one's weird. That one's quirky.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a Cronenberg movie.
I'll watch that again anytime. No, I know.
We can't hold Kosinski to the Cronenberg standard of
I hold everybody to the Cronenberg standard. No, I just I thought I missed something. I guess I didn't.
No, I mean, I think it's just supposed to be like kind of an evocative sci-fi title, you know? It reminds me very much of the video game Destiny in its like iconography, and
there's a video game called Oblivion too, isn't there?
Oh, there's the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That has actually a story. there's a thing called the Oblivion Gates that are like these powerful like, you know, gates into another dimension or whatever. So there, you know, that has actually a story reason why it's called Oblivion. I don't know why this is called Oblivion.
What I like about this story is that's what this is, right? I mean, we're tracking a thing, like a career that is still in progress. And I feel like we're going to do that a lot with filmmakers that, like, he's got the film coming out in 2025. For me, there is a happy ending here, right? Like, this is a stumble in Act 1 or Act 2. You know, it's the, like, he's just not quite finding himself yet. He's suffering some setbacks, but we know there is a redemptive arc here with Top Gun Maverick, and possibly that even begins in his next movie. For the life of me, we've been talking about him for so long, like before when we were first pitching the show, I thought there was a movie between this one and Only the Brave. And I was like, I was just driving the other day and I had no internet access, and that it's like, all right, what is that other movie that we need to see? And it's like, oh, there is none. It's this one, then Only the Brave, then we get to Maverick, and then we're all like, we're sadly closer to the end of our run with him than I'd like to be.
Well, we'll see. If we're sad about it after we finish the series, but we will.
No, maybe.
We will end up watching. You know, when we cover a filmmaker, if they have a new movie come out, we'll kind of do like a special one-off episode where we talk about that movie. Whenever this 2025 movie comes out, this F1 movie, we'll definitely talk about it. Interestingly, you brought up the Glenn Powell thing just quickly. He was, again, we'll talk about this probably in the Spiderhead episode. I'm gonna assume this when this would come up, but he was supposed to direct Twisters. Joseph Kosinski.
Glenn Powell?
No, Joseph Kosinski.
I was like, wow, that guy's really multi-talented.
No, Joseph Kosinski was supposed to direct Twisters.
Well, he's got a story credit on. I'm sorry, I did see that.
Yeah, and then when they were kind of like, it was supposed to be like kind of like a reboot or whatever when he was working on it, and then they're like, no, we kind of want it to be like a sequel to Twister. And when they did that, he left the project apparently because it wasn't his like story anymore or whatever. He didn't want to do a different type of story. So.
I feel like he's kind of not the guy for that.
Kosinski, in many ways, is a sort of dying breed of filmmaker because, you know, after this movie, he kind of becomes the more journeyman sort of situation where he's working for other people or getting hired by a studio to come in and direct a script or whatever. At least,
and a big,
yes,
large budget,
yes,
like major actors, major cast. I mean, it's A-list all the way.
Yeah. And I think next week is going to be fascinating too, because I think we're going to very much talk about the fact that it's also the type of movie that doesn't really get made very much anymore, which is a bunch of famous people all in a movie together. And the movie's not about superheroes or it's not science fiction.
It's based on a true story. Yeah. I love those kinds of things.
It's like a mid-budget character drama, you know, and I
well, with some firefighting scenes,
I'm sure, yes, but still.
I feel like there's gonna be some visually stunning stuff happening in that area.
I can't imagine there isn't. It used to be called Stone Mountain, not Stone Mountain. Again, it's not Stone Mountain. It had another name, Granite Mountain or something. It was the name before Only the Brave. A much better name though than Only the Brave, which I feel like I thought when I heard the name, it was like one of those like Christian. You know,
see, I pictured a generic military drama, Only the Brave in the poster, somebody getting the pin, like the wings pinned on him or something like that.
We'll see. You know, we'll see how it is when we actually watch it. But I'm excited to check it out. You can find us at Intrepid Filmographers on social media. And we will be, by the time you're hearing this, obviously, hopefully we've banked a bunch of episodes, so there'll be a presence going on. Right now, I've obviously looked at anything. We are right at the beginning of this, so we don't really have much going on. We haven't even figured out how to really promote the show yet. We don't have theme music yet for the show, but this is Bobby cutting in. We have, in fact, figured it out. Intrepidfilmographers.com will take us to the site where you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts. Grab the RSS feed if that's your jam. Rate and review us on whatever podcast service you're using. Subscribe to us on Substack. Subscribe to us on YouTube so you don't miss anything. If you're interested in seeing me, Bobby, stream a little bit, twitch.tv/misadventureland. So check that out over there. And yeah, we will hopefully see you over there. Join us. We want to build a community of movie fans. Until then, let's go back to past Nick and Bobby, where we're talking about how we don't know what we're doing. I'm really excited so far about what we've been talking about, Nick, and I'm really excited for...
We're really revealing how the sausage gets made there.
You know what? The people who listen to a show like this love how the sausage gets made. That's why people listen to people talk about movies like this.
I want to be that like dead solid professional Joseph Kosinski kind of person where it's like, this has just been happening. Like we had this all figured out years ago and we did the graphic novel.
Yeah. Never intended to be published, but we used it as a pitch deck for this podcast. As much as I don't really care about this filmmaker's films anymore, or even their like online persona anymore, it was very much. So you were brought up on like the Kevin Smith sort of time of filmmaking. I want to still like
Kevin Smith, so I've got Kevin Smith sitting behind me on the shelf here. That version of him is making better movies than the real Kevin Smith. Now.
A huge part of my formative years of this, and he was always so open about this is the shit that happens. This is the good stuff. This is the bad stuff, or whatever. And that really was appealing to me, as a young film fan. So that's how I sort of think about this stuff. Is let's just let everyone know that it's just sometimes you got to build the plane while it's flying.
That's fair.
That's how it goes. But that's gonna do it for this week. Until next week, Nick, are we still an effective team?